This isn't just reporting for technical journalists. This is reporting for journalists who cover politics, who cover health, who cover criminal justice systems. AI is something that is intersecting with so many fundamental parts of our society, and it's a beat that we should all be literate about. Hi, my name is Gabriel Geiger. I'm an investigative journalist at Lighthouse Reports. I'm based out of Brazil, and I oftentimes work on stories around algorithmic accountability or investigations into technology. If I were to give advice to people who are starting this reporting now, I'd say two things. The first part I would say is you don't need to be a technical expert, and you can collaborate with people who are, whether it be civil society organizations, academics, NGOs, who can help you with that part of it. You do not need to be a data scientist to do this type of reporting. The second part would be understand the types of stories you can tell. What is it that you actually want to investigate? I think there's a tendency to want to investigate everything there is about an AI system, but there are different strands that you can focus on and make your reporting more manageable. Is it a story about the technology? Is it a story about the people impacted? Is it a story about the politics driving its adoption? Is it a story about the companies that are making money off a problematic AI system? And knowing which one of these you want to lean into can make your first story more manageable and sort of focus your reporting rather than trying to do everything all at once. In terms of actual tips, one of the first questions that you always get is, where do I actually start, right? How do I actually find a story? And I think there, when you're talking about government algorithms, you should be thinking about what are the processes that the state or governments have in place. So whether it be deciding whether an application for housing should be accepted, or whether it should be how a judge decides a case. Think about how an algorithm or AI might be integrated in one of these processes, and oftentimes it is, or is about to be. And that can be a good starting point. Another starting point, I think, is to think about, to look for cases in which people are reporting, for example, that all of a sudden they've been receiving government benefits and they don't receive it anymore. And when they try to find out answers why, they don't get anywhere. Something used to go this way, and suddenly it all of a sudden changed in a really opaque way. And that can be a great sort of starting point for saying, okay, well, maybe that's because there's an automated system being used now. Once you actually understand that an automated system is being used, you have to think about, well, what do I actually need to examine how the system works? The key things that you could try to get is, for example, technical documents that explain how an algorithm is work. How is it making decisions about people? What's the internal logic there? And you can get things like government reports, technical documents. Oftentimes, there's a human being or caseworker who's interacting with an algorithm. How are they supposed to interact with that algorithm? You can try to get things like the PowerPoints or the manuals that are given to these caseworkers that have to deal with this piece of software. Another thing you can try to do is try to get data about how the system is working. That's often one of the most effective routes. So you understand an automated decision-making system is deciding on applications for housing assistance, let's say. Well, you can try to get data about how many women has it rejected versus how many men? How many people of a migration background versus people of a native background? And you can try to understand its impact in the real world through data. Sometimes you might be lucky enough to get all of it, and you can tell a really complete story about how the system works. Other times you might get little pieces here and there, but you can still publish something pointing out potential errors that can rise in the way that the system was designed and the impacts on people, and sort of use that as leverage to try to get more information about the system. When we're talking about government algorithms and obtaining information about them, the first method is using freedom of information laws, public records laws. So you can try to send freedom of information requests to a government asking them for data, or you can ask them for documents. When it comes to actually how do you do this, how do you send a freedom of information request, it's good to break it into chunks. So you start your first freedom of information request asking for more simple documents, things that are very specific. What's the manual for the piece of software? What's the contract with the company that built the software? These really basic documents that you know will exist. And that's a way of not freaking out the government agency, because if you ask them right away for a big data set, they're going to freak out and shut you down right away. So you sort of ask in layers. Okay, first we ask for the really basic documents. Okay, then we send another FOIA asking for more technical documents. And what that also allows you to do is if, okay, they respond to your first FOIA request and disclose you some documents, you still have a story to tell. You have your sort of minimum story, a minimum layer of understanding of how the system works, and then you can go for the more data-driven, fancy stuff afterwards. I think journalists thus far have leaned a lot more on freedom of information laws rather than source development when it comes to these stories. But I think they maybe lean a little bit too much on freedom of information laws. I think that old-fashioned source development can be a really effective way for getting this same type of information. I think that there can be a tendency, and I've seen this in myself, to really tunnel on the technical side, and then you kind of, okay, I understand how the system works, but I don't actually have any understanding of how it affects real people. And actually understanding and finding people who have been affected by one of these systems can be really difficult because they're not told by a government most of the time, oh, this bad thing that happened to you because of an AI system. They see the consequence, but they don't have the connection there. And so finding a story of someone where you can really prove that, oh, this harm was because of an AI system is really difficult and something that people need to focus early on. In terms of how do you do that, one of the sort of key ways that we've seen in our reporting, look for the lawyers. So if you're investigating an AI system deployed in the social services sphere, look for lawyers that help people who are struggling with the social services system. If you're looking for an AI system deployed in a policing criminal justice context, look for defense lawyers who are working with clients. And these lawyers oftentimes have privileged ability to request files from the government about their client that will show, oh, look, this person was denied their housing benefit because of an AI system. Another way you can sort of find people is through community groups. People who are sort of working, embedded in communities on the ground, they see effects, they see patterns. All of a sudden, I see single mothers in this particular community are struggling with this particular government agency. And it wasn't like that before. So these are some sort of avenues for finding the human stories that, if you aren't able to find, are going to be difficult to make your story sort of relatable and sort of make that connection with readers.